This is the greatest crime against women in all of human history.
A congressional leader takes aim at sex-selective abortion. Healing hands. As an investigation reveals more about the death of Freddie Gray, Baltimore faith leaders boldly speak out. Miraculous rescues. Signs of life and hope amid death and destruction in Nepal. And close to the Pope, we sit down with one of the Holy Father's trusted advisors. Those stories and more on EWTN News Nightly for Thursday, April 30th, 2015. Good evening from Washington. Thanks for joining us. I'm Brian Patrick with your news now. China's infamous one-child policy now marks 35 years. One aspect of this forced population control involves the killing of millions of baby girls in the womb. Susanne LaFrankie is following a congressional hearing on these coerced sex-selective abortions and has more from Capitol Hill tonight.
Brian, today a House committee hearing focused on population control and forced abortion in China. The chairman of that committee is Representative Chris Smith. Smith has been a pro-life leader in Congress for over 3 decades, and he calls this the war on women.
In many Asian countries today, the 3 most dangerous words are, "It's a girl."
Representative Chris Smith says China's forced sex-selective abortions are the most violent form of discrimination against women.
The most horrific war on women occurring today is on the girl child in the womb through sex selection abortion, and that does take place in the United States.
But aborting baby girls is most common in Asia.
There are about 160 million missing females in Asia, mostly in China and in India, as a direct consequence of the sex selection mentality and implemented by way of sex selection abortion.
Smith says as a result, China has the highest gender imbalance worldwide, with 80 female births to every 100 baby boys. The human rights advocate says the country's coercive policies are a demographic time bomb.
40+ million men by 2020 will never find a wife because they don't exist.
Smith says the dramatic gender imbalance is one factor driving human trafficking.
It'll be an engraved invitation to those who will turn women into commodities, the traffickers and the pimps, to invade China with women for exploitation purposes.
And although 9 out of 10 Americans oppose sex-selective abortions, the practice is a growing problem in the United States, according to the New Jersey Republican.
There were Planned Parenthood personnel saying, well, if you just wait to the 5th month, when we can determine the gender of the child, then you can destroy the child.
We reached out to Planned Parenthood for a statement on sex-selective abortions. They did not return our call. Smith is calling for trade sanctions on China for these human rights violations. Brian?
Susanne LaFrankie on Capitol Hill. Thank you. Now, some of the other stories our EWTN News Nightly team has been covering in today's world. Baltimore police today turn over findings from their investigation into the death of Freddie Gray.
This does not mean that the investigation is over. If new evidence is found, we will follow it. If new direction is given by the state's attorney, we will obey it and we will follow through with the investigation.
Gray suffered spinal injuries while in police custody and died a week later. No details of the report have been made public. The police did say a van carrying Gray made a stop previously not mentioned. The 6 officers involved are suspended with pay.
We know, we strong, we must know that long.
Protests over Gray's death spread to other cities Wednesday, including this demonstration in Washington. There were others in Boston and in New York. Most were peaceful, but police did make arrests, including at least 60 in New York City. This morning, I visited St. Peter Claver Parish near the Baltimore neighborhood where Freddie Gray was arrested. In just a few minutes, we share a roundup of interfaith leaders committed to healing and uniting Baltimore. Meanwhile, incredible stories of survival come from Nepal. Rescue crews pull a teenager alive from earthquake rubble where he's been trapped for 5 days. Hundreds cheered when he was carried away on a stretcher. Medics put an IV drip in his arm and a brace around his neck. All the teen was able to eat while trapped for 5 days was some butter. Crews sent by the U.S. helped with his rescue today.
Today is amazing. This is This is what we do. This is the thousands of hours that we as Urban Search and Rescue members representing the United States of America, we do that.
Also in Nepal, a 4-month-old baby boy is reunited with his family today. A Nepalese newspaper reports the Army initially failed to rescue the baby, thinking he had died. After the infant was heard crying, the Army returned and got him out 22 hours after the quake hit. Saturday's 7.8 magnitude earthquake in Nepal has claimed nearly 6,000 lives. Earlier today, Catherine Szeltner spoke with a Mercy Corps officer helping with ongoing relief efforts.
It's been 5 days since the earthquake struck. We know people are hungry and on the streets. Has your group been able to get food to people?
Mercy Corps is working hard to get to some of these areas that are just the most devastated by this quake. We're responding with water purification tablets. There really is no clean water in a lot of these areas, as well as tarps to provide people some shelter from some of the heavy rains we've been experiencing.
And it sounds like many of the rescue efforts are grassroots and many foreign countries are sending help. How is the response being organized in Nepal?
We're starting to see a broad coalition of support come together, and Mercy Corps has been meeting with our local Nepali partners, as well as many international organizations to coordinate the relief effort.
It will take months and years for Nepal to recover. How long are you planning on being there, and what does that recovery timeline look like realistically?
Well, Mercy Corps has been in Nepal since 2006. We have over 100 staff members on the ground, and we plan to be here for the years to come. But to be honest with you, my coworker today was telling me that she spoke with a woman who said that she can't even think to next week. She just is really concerned about how she's going to put a roof over her head today, how she's going to get clean water to drink. We know the road is hard and it is a long road, but it's devastating for the people that are walking on it with us.
And Christy, how can we help just the relief efforts there in Nepal right now?
What's really most needed at this point, and what really can magnify our ability to deliver relief, is financial donations. And viewers can go to mercycorps.org to make a gift and support those efforts.
Christy, thank you so much for joining us from Nepal. Prayers for your work.
Thank you so much.
Catherine and Christy, thank you. And the Vatican will host a charity concert next month with a Pope Francis twist. The VIP seats will be for the poor and the elderly. This is his latest outreach to the homeless in Rome. Pope Francis recently had showers installed for the homeless in restrooms near St. Peter's Square. He then arranged to give them a private tour of the Sistine Chapel. Concert organizers say next month's event will be with and for the poor. The concert is scheduled for May 14th, the Feast of the Assumption. That is the Ascension, I'm sorry. Today's announcement comes as Pope Francis calls on Catholics to share the gospel with the world, in the middle of the world. The Holy Father saying that Catholics shouldn't look at the world from a balcony. He is urging the faithful to go out into the world, get involved in society, and change our culture. Well, experts in California history, archaeology, and Blessed Junipero Serra are gathered in Rome ahead of Serra's canonization this fall. They're exploring the life and legacy of Father Serra, who founded the first 9 California missions. The Franciscan is known as the evangelizer of the West in the United States. Pope Francis will canonize Serra here in Washington on September 23rd. Some Native Americans accuse the missionary of torture, demanding his statue be removed from the U.S. Capitol. Dr. Ruben Mendoza, an archaeologist with California State University, is joining us from Rome, an expert on Father Junipero Serra. You say that Father Serra could be seen as a martyr. Why?
Well, Father Serra has been misrepresented. He's been maligned as part of the larger colonial enterprise of Spanish America. The reality is, when you look and interrogate the documentary record, you examine the archaeological record, the historical documents, you come to get a very different picture of who Fray Junipero Serra was. He was a man that was an advocate for the California Indians, as he was for those of Baja California and for the Sierra Gorda in Mexico. And yet, despite that fact, he is being represented and misrepresented for a variety of what I believe are largely politicized reasons that could be construed as anti-Hispanic, anti-Catholic, and they do in fact inflict themselves on our heritage.
Do you think that California Catholics, especially those of Hispanic descent, see Father Serra the way he's been misrepresented or for the saint that he truly is?
Well, I think the reality is that depending on the longevity of those individuals in California, if they were born there, they've probably heard one thing or another about Father Serra. They've probably been through the 4th grade curriculum that portrays the Hispanic Catholic conversion of natives in a very questionable way. And as a result, public education has served to malign that tradition. But I don't believe, for the most part, that Latinos, Hispanics of California, see him in a negative light. I think in many cases they don't know who he really was because of the way in which he's been portrayed. There is a minority of people, however, who see him in a very negative light. And as a result, we find ourselves having to contend with those issues on an ongoing basis.
Did he not contribute such a great deal to American culture, especially in the West?
Well, if you consider that we often glorify the pioneers of the westward movement, it's ironic that the northward movement out of Mexico into California and the Southwest has been pretty much diminished in the historical tradition of the United States. In fact, Serra, through the friars and the Mexican Indians that accompanied him, introduced agriculture, stock raising, irrigation systems, viticulture, metallurgy, and a whole host of other contributions, including medicine, that are often not seen as part of the American contribution.
And what do you think is the legacy that he leaves us as Americans and as Catholics?
Well, as Americans, he leaves us a legacy that he basically was the evangelist and the colonist and the individual who formed those communities that are now modern American cities of California. San Francisco is not named San Francisco without cause, as is San Diego or Los Angeles. All of them the result of the heritage brought to California by Junípero Serra. As Catholics, we have a great debt to pay to Junípero Serra for introducing Catholicism to California and for basically standing his ground against in tremendous odds.
Dr. Ruben Mendoza joining us from Rome. Thank you, Dr. Mendoza.
Well, thank you for having me.
And one of the Pope's closest advisors tells EWTN News Nightly the Holy Father's trip to the U.S. this fall will make a big impact. Cardinal Oscar Rodriguez Maradiaga of Honduras says the Holy Father plans to address a number of social justice issues. Francis visits 3 American cities in September. Last night at Georgetown University in Washington, the Cardinal detailed the Pope's vision for a church that cares for the poor and vulnerable. Cardinal Rodriguez talked with our Wyatt Goolsby. His Eminence believes the Holy Father will challenge Americans to put the poor first.
Well, Your Eminence, thank you so much for joining us. Thank you for your time. Let's start first with the Pope's much anticipated visit to the U.S. in September. What are you looking forward to hearing from the Pope, and what do you think his message is going to be to Americans?
Well, I'm not a prophet, but I know that he will, of course, in all his trips, he is announcing Jesus Christ, especially promoting a personal encounter with Christ, not only an intellectual encounter. Then, of course, he will talk about mercy, because it's one of the key themes in his magisterium. And then, of course, he will talk about poverty.
So you yourself are the leader of a group of 9 cardinals that are meeting with the Pope regularly to talk about Vatican reform and reform in the Church itself. I know a lot of those meetings are behind closed doors, but can you tell us a little bit about what the tone is like in those meetings?
I can tell you it's a joy, because we meet with him 3 full days. Morning, afternoons, and evenings. We pray together, we celebrate the Holy Mass together, and it's a beautiful opportunity. There is a big spirit of family.
You mentioned that Pope Francis has preached a church that serves the poor. Do you think that that's a central point to his pontificate? Do you think that years down the line, that's going to be the biggest influence that he has on the church?
What I have been looking now is that many people, or many also particular churches that never had that as the main objective, now are changing. And of course, we cannot ignore that. The Pope is only receiving the mandate of the Church. Do not forget the poor.
Your Eminence, as always, we appreciate the time and your being willing to sit down with us and talk with us about Pope Francis, his vision and his message, and obviously his upcoming visit. Thanks so much.
All the best for you, and keep doing so much good in TV.
Coming up, we're in Baltimore with a rabbi, bishops, and pastors taking the lead toward healing the racial divide. And later, the world's most serious abusers of religious freedom. On Thursday, the 30th of April, you're watching EWTN News Nightly. I'm Brian Patrick. We're in historic St. Peter Claver Church in Sandtown, Winchester, a neighborhood of Baltimore, not very far from where Freddie Gray was arrested. There's been a lot of tension here, and we are blessed to have a great panel of interfaith leaders from the Baltimore area. We thank you all for coming, and I just want to ask each of you, what can we do as a people of faith to address these underlying issues, the tensions that have boiled over recently here in Baltimore and in other cities?
Brian, I think the key word there is underlying issues. We can help to make sure that we address the root causes, not just the symptoms of what we have seen in Baltimore this past week. As people of faith, I think we can partner with others, government, nonprofit sector, to help with unemployment, affordable housing, and all the other things that lead us to this place. But then I think as people of faith, we are uniquely qualified to help have the conversation on race and on racial relations that this country has so desperately tried to avoid and so desperately needs.
I think that we can follow in the footsteps of our shared prophets and speak out against injustice in our communities, speak out for equality in our communities as faith communities. But along with that, we also have to live as religious and moral exemplars, showing by our actions how to live in peace and harmony with one another, so that Baltimore can take the lead from us.
I think one of the real tragedies that might result or could possibly result from this situation is that when things calm down, when all the police barricades are down, we return to business as usual. That, in my mind, would be a real tragedy. This is a moment to awaken everyone to the situation. I feel, especially like within our archdiocese, it's good for everyone, the folks out west, mid-Maryland, all over, to really take an active part in coming together as faith communities to really right this situation that we're in right now.
And so it's a significant teaching moment for congregations across the country to provide practical opportunities for applying faith. Faith without works is dead, whether it's at the conversational level to understand the issues, partnering together to address some of the issues, or just thinking deeply about what is God saying to me about this moment and where do I get involved. That's a significant teachable moment that we ought not lose.
Bishop Sutton?
The rabbi mentioned our shared prophets, and what I'm thinking of right now is Micah. And that great question, what does the Lord require of you? And Micah said to do justice, to love mercy, and to walk humbly before God. And I think those three things right there are three things that I think faith leaders can really demonstrate for our people and to encourage people to do justice. And justice is called for in this case. What is justice for Freddie Gray's family, and justice for the dozens of others? And then the prophet said, love mercy. And of course, that's a heart thing. And we, as people of faith, know about loving kindness, mercy coming from our heart, and then walking humbly before God. Literally, I think we need to be walking our neighborhoods. And I'm encouraging our pastors, walk humbly in our neighborhoods.
Is part of the problem that we become such a godless society that we've lost track of God's mercy? And how can we be merciful if we're not in tune with that?
I don't think this is a godless society. God is very much in this society. We have forgotten. And it's our job as faith leaders to do it, to remind people God has not left the scene.
If we were mindful of God's great love and mercy for us, if we really felt that and know what that meant, then we would be impelled, we'd be driven to be merciful to each other. We would not allow people to live in these substandard conditions that they live in today. It would be something that we just could not tolerate if we really felt God's mercy and then let that mercy extend to our communities.
I get the sense that something good can come out of this.
Would you agree?
Yeah, I would agree. Judaism believes that the gates of redemption are always open. And so the message for us is that it's never too late. Regardless of our history, regardless of how it's always been done, it's never too late to make it better. And now is the time to make it better.
If something good does not come out of this, it is going to be the clearest testament against the works of faith communities across this country that we have squandered an opportunity to be practical demonstrators of God's love in the world in times of crisis. Something must come out of this that is good for people to know that God still loves them.
I think the eyes of the world are on Baltimore right now. And I think we should deal with the issues that we have to deal with now in an exemplary way that can help other communities. It shouldn't be Baltimore this week and another city next week and so on. I think that we should lead there as well. That what we do here is very important for our community and for the wider community of our nation.
Today on this 30th of April, we celebrate St. Pius V, known as the Pope of the Rosary. He urged Europeans to pray the Rosary for Christians battling Turks in the 16th century. The outnumbered Christian armies won. Thanks for joining us on this Thursday evening. I'm Brian Patrick. As millions flee religious persecution worldwide, a new report says the U.S. should add 8 new nations to a watch list. Jason Calvi is here now with more.
Brian, the U.S. Commission on International Religious Freedom, known as USCIRF, puts out the yearly survey. This year, some of the countries featured include Iraq, Syria, and Nigeria. The group accuses those countries of some of the more serious abuses of religious freedom in the world. According to USCIRF, Boko Haram has driven 1 million Nigerians from their homes. In Iraq, ISIS has forced 2 million to escape. And in Syria, nearly 9.8 million have fled. USCIRF aims to ensure that every society protects religious freedom, and according to this year's report, 33 countries violate that universal right.
In society after society, a failure to secure that most basic of freedoms, the freedom of religion and belief, that is to a significant degree at the root of the problems that these countries are grappling with.
Dr. Lanto Sweat, chair of the commission, tells me the situation in many parts of the world is dire, but things can turn around. She's urging the Obama administration to take in 30,000 more refugees every year from around the world. The report isn't all negative. One bright spot: there was no religious violence during Nigeria's recent elections. And Brian, if you'd like to read the full report, it is on our Facebook page.
Thank you, Jason Calvi. Well, Pope Francis says history and service are 2 traits of Christian identity. During his homily today at the Casa Santa Barto, where he lives, the Pope said the Christian is not a spiritual man or woman in a laboratory, but a member of a community with a history. Turning to service, then, the Holy Father says being a Christian is not about appearance, a little makeup for the soul. It means serving like Jesus served. Pope Francis calls on us to ask, what more can I do? Amid the music, food, and fanfare of the New Orleans Jazz Fest is something you might find a bit surprising: a funeral procession. Mourners hold photographs of their beloved departed. They strut and sway with decorative feather fans, umbrellas, and handkerchiefs. Eben Bryce held a picture of his late dad as he danced through the crowd. His father, Bruce Bryce, was the New Orleans artist who created the first official Jazz Fest poster in 1970.
He's on his next journey. He's graduated. I know he's up there with a lot of the greats he's painting for God, a lot of other fellow artists that have passed away.
This unique New Orleans tradition known as a jazz funeral is now common at Jazz Fest. That's the annual celebration of music and culture going on right now in the Big Easy. Well, until tomorrow, like us on Facebook, follow us on Twitter, and watch again on YouTube. For the EWTN News Nightly team, I'm Brian Patrick. Good night, and may God bless you.